Hey there, it's Gary Parrish. Welcome back to the CBS Sports Eye on College Basketball Podcast, where we sometimes discuss camel fighting, dodo birds, and leaky black. Matt Norlander is here with me. If you're watching on YouTube, smash the like button like you're Brandon Davies. You have consent. If you haven't yet subscribed to the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube channel, also do that while you're here. Let's get into it. There's been some notable transfer announcements over the past few days. In order, they came off the board like this. On Monday, Tre Mitchell announced his transfer from West Virginia to Kentucky. On Tuesday, Jordan Brown announced his transfer from Louisiana to Memphis. On Wednesday, Grant Nelson announced his transfer from North Dakota State to Alabama. Which one of these players is going to make the biggest positive impact at their new school? I'm going to ask Deadleg that next. But first, quick word from our partners.
You gonna start the engine sometime soon, Erica?
Do you know the odds of all of us being here at this time? It's improbable, yet here we are, together.
Hold on to your saddles.
Matt Norlander, Tre Mitchell to Kentucky, Jordan Brown to Memphis, Grant Nelson to Alabama. Who matters most?
I think Grant Nelson matters most. How about Jordan Brown, though? Jordan Brown, trivia time, class of
2018.
I know you knew it. 2018.
How about this? How about this?
Go ahead.
Jordan Brown, class of 2018, five-star prospect. That is the same class. You remember R.J. Barrett?
Vaguely.
Okay. R.J. Barrett was in that class. So was Zion.
Yeah.
They were about to start their fifth seasons in the
Second
NBA.
NBA contract. I know.
They're going to be in year 5 of their NBA career while Jordan Brown is playing in the American Athletic Conference for Penny Hardaway's Tigers.
And listen, if Jordan Brown, who happens to be listening to this pod, seems unlikely, but anyone connected, that we're not trying to rub it in. I'm sure anyone listening to this, because Jordan Brown was once upon a time top 20 player in his class, and on some level might have even had expectations of having a one and done season, if not maybe a 2 and 3. That's not how it happened. Jordan Brown started his career at Nevada with Eric Musselman, who we will get to in just a short bit here, and then played at Arizona for a season, then at Louisiana. Now he's heading to Memphis. I actually think that's going to be a significant addition for Memphis and increases the Tigers' bona fides heading into next season. That should be the best team in the American on the whole. Remember, you have the Big 12 restructuring this season, so you will not have Houston in that league anymore. So I actually think his addition is significant there. He was, listen, I welcome all children of the 90s, and Jordan Brown was born in December of 99. I'd like to see that he's sticking around. So, yeah, well, again, we're going to have a few 25-year-olds yet again in college basketball this season. This is part of that COVID bonus year, and that is significant. Tre Mitchell, long expected, and finally official, not long expected, but basically since he went into the portal, highly rumored to be going to Kentucky, that indeed wound up being the case there. Kentucky's actually managed to settle itself a bit here. We did talk about the Cats a few shows ago, and where Calipari was at that point, only 7 scholarships were taken up. I think Mitchell is a good addition. Does he raise UK's floor? Probably so. Also a well-traveled young man who began his career at UMass, then went to Texas, and then spent some time at West Virginia, and now he will play for a 4th program and going to play for Calipari. But to me, it's Grant Nelson who's the most significant. And my understanding was, now this was another one that had been long, like weeks upon weeks was the expectation that he'd be going there. Nelson, I think, had to firm up something coursework wise to just make sure that the transfer to Alabama went seamlessly, and that got done. And so he finally was able to commit earnestly and officially on Wednesday. And his addition is, I think, going to be pretty good. He shot 60% from 2-point range last season at North Dakota State. He's a 6'11", like true stretch 4'5", and I'm not going to. We're in the middle of June or the end of June. I'm not going to get too in the weeds on this, but one of the reasons why Nelson was particularly coveted was his catch and shoot numbers and his work off of screens from a synergy perspective were like among the best in the country among any transfer. So he actually has some really good projectables to the next level. Alabama beat out Arkansas to get Grant Nelson, and in doing so, I think really helped its roster situation. We talked earlier this week, GP, that Javon Quinterly has left the program there. They play very, very different positions, but even if it was anticipated, good to know for the Tide fans that actually have a guy coming aboard who will be expected to be a significant contributor. Nelson was one of the best mid-major players in the country. So for your question, I would order it like this. I think Nelson will wind up being the best of these three and the most impactful. I'd go Jordan Brown 2, and then I would go Tre Mitchell at Kentucky 3 overall.
I would go slightly different order. I'd go Jordan Brown 1, then Grant Nelson, then Tre Mitchell. And just sort of the quick explanation for that order would be, Tre Mitchell averaged 11.7 points, 5.5 rebounds, 1.8 assists last season at West Virginia. I just think he's going to be surrounded by so many other super talented guys that his impact will be his roster impact is very important. It is why I took Kentucky from outside of the top 25 or barely in the top 25 and 1 at like number 25 or 24 up to number 17 right now, because 2 weeks ago they technically had 0 notable experienced players on the roster. It was just the number 1 ranked recruiting class, bunch of freshmen and guys who'd never done anything. Then they got Antonio Reeves back to school. That matters. And then they got Tre Mitchell enrolled. That matters. So now they'll start 3 5-star freshmen at Kentucky alongside 2 proven, experienced guys. Tre Mitchell is not Oscar Tshiebwe, right? But he was an important addition to this roster because he fills a position of need, and he's older and experienced. He's been through it. It means you'll be relying heavily in your starting lineup on 3 freshmen instead of maybe 4. All right. So I think he matters, but I think statistically, I don't even know that it'll look like what it looked like last season at West Virginia, maybe, but I'm not sure. Grant Nelson is the classic mid-major player transferring up to a power conference. Those numbers tend to come down when players do that. I think he's a perfect fit there. We've talked for hours on this podcast about, Nate Oats' commitment to style of play and taking roughly 50% of your field goal attempts from 3. Well, to have a stretch big like this, plays right into that. Now, he did only shoot 26.9% from 3, but like you said, the catch and shoot numbers were good. And at the very least, you got to guard him you got to go with him out to the 3-point line. And so that's a good roster addition. It wasn't enough to make me put Alabama back in the top 25 and 1 because, they're going to be down 5 of their top 6 players from last season's team. Like, it's a whole new group of guys. I won't be surprised if they're really good again. They have won 2 of the past 3 SEC regular season titles, but I will probably start them outside of the top 25 and 1, at least based on the roster in place right now. Jordan Brown, he's going from mid-major league to mid-major league. The American Athletic Conference is, as you know, losing Houston.
Yeah.
And is no longer – there was a time where we talked about the AAC as maybe, a top 5 or top 6 league in college basketball. And or at least top 7.
Definitely top 7.
Definitely top 7. And I don't know that it's going to be that in its newest form. So Jordan Brown, yeah, he put up massive numbers at Louisiana, 19.3 points, 8.6 rebounds, 1.2 blocks per game, won the Lou Henson Award, which goes annually to the top mid-major player. He's going to a league that if he could physically overwhelm that league, I think he could physically overwhelm most of the AAC. So I would assume he's going to be terrific at Memphis. And there is a scenario where Penny Hardaway, after really losing one player after another to the transfer portal, you could look up in 2 weeks or 2 months, and Penny Hardaway might have a roster that looks like top 15 in the country. Right now, they've got Caleb Mills on campus. Obviously, started his career at Houston and then went to Florida State. He's a proven commodity at this level. He was at one point the preseason AAC Player of the Year before he transferred from Houston. So they got him on campus. They got Jordan Brown on campus. And DeAndre Williams is trying to get an extra year of eligibility. He's got Don Jackson representing him. I don't know if that's going to work or not, but he is attempting.
God bless this man, and I hope it happens.
I hope it happens too. He's a really good. I know people get caught up on the age.
Emphasis on the man.
And the age is like he will turn 27 years old in October. Okay, it's obviously unusual, but he's a great, or at least really good. But I would lean towards he's a really good college player.
He's had time to master the craft now.
He has mastered the craft of being a college player. So you could have and they're involved with Javon Quinterly. Now, I don't know if they're going to get Javon Quinterly. Miami's reportedly involved. Kansas State's reportedly involved. Auburn's reportedly involved. All of those schools have been wildly successful in the transfer portal NIL era. So Memphis is up against it there. But let's just play for the sake of the conversation, best case scenario for Memphis. That doesn't include Mikey Williams getting on campus, because I don't think he's going to end up at Memphis. He's facing multiple felony charges for allegedly firing a gun into a car filled with people. Yeah. And nobody said he didn't do it. He's pleaded not guilty, but nobody said, hey, you don't understand. Mikey didn't really fire that gun. And the time frame doesn't feel like it's going to be settled or resolved in time for him to be on campus. I just don't see how Memphis can enroll him under these circumstances. So let's take him, set him to the side. They still got David Jones, a transfer from St. John's, who averaged like 13 points per game last season. So Memphis could theoretically, if everything goes right, and by right, I mean they add Quinterly and they get DeAndre Williams eligible, starting lineup of Javon Quinterly, Caleb Mills, David Jones, DeAndre Williams, and Jordan Brown. Those players, on average, 24.2 years old.
You should have trivia timed me, and if you would have trivia timed, I probably would have come in around 23.1.
Yeah, so. 24.2. Quinterly turns 25 in November. Caleb Mills turns 23 in July. David Jones turns 22 in November. DeAndre Williams turns 27 in October, and Jordan Brown turns 24 in December. Would that be the oldest starting lineup in college basketball ever?
Gotta be. It
has to be.
That would unquestionably, because remember, we had never had this situation before the dumbest pandemic of our lifetimes, where the college athletes were given across the board the extra year of eligibility. And so because of that, you have a situation where even during the days when you had the idea of a starting five that was five seniors was not uncommon. And even if you throw in the occasional grad transfer, they still wouldn't have hit this age. Putting an entirely, if that does come to pass, putting an entirely new meaning to get old, stay old. No, they are the AARP carrying program of college basketball. And purely from a coverage standpoint, I'd love to see it. I would genuinely love to see how a team that is more than 24 years old on average performs in the sport, because you have so much physical maturity, mental maturity, guys that have taken many roads to get to that point, playing at a very prideful program like Memphis. We'll see if we get there, but if we do, on talent and experience alone, I think you'd have to put Memphis in the top 20, no matter what, if it gets to that point, because we've seen how these teams that have these players that have extreme experience to the names in this new era has mattered, and certainly valued by the coaching staffs. Now you got to gel, and you got to, there are still things that you got to do as a team to actually achieve those objectives, but damn, that would be something else if we get to that point.
And it just shows you how much the sport has changed, and perhaps how much Penny Hardaway's approach has changed. Game 1, year 2 at Memphis, Penny Hardaway started 5 freshmen. Game 1 in I don't even know what year this is, maybe year 5 or 6, whatever it is.
I'm gonna say it's 5, but keep going.
He could start 5 guys, all of whom started their college careers somewhere else, and who would the average age would be 24.2 years old. There is a scenario where the Memphis Grizzlies use lineups next season that are on average younger than lineups the Memphis Tigers use.
Year 6, by the way, for Penny.
Year 6, yeah.
And that means that Jordan Brown and Penny Hardaway started their college careers at the same time.
No, how about this? Quinterly is just like Jordan Brown in the sense that he was in the 5-star prospect in the class of 2018. Penny Hardaway used to recruit 5-star prospects from the class that's about to graduate, and he still does, by the way, Mikey Williams. But having 2 5-star prospects from the class of 2018 in 2023, that feels almost impossible.
Matt Ward in the chat says, great thing for Memphis is they don't need NIL because their team can all get Social Security, tip your waitresses. Here we go with all that.
They're able to already withdraw from their 401ks.
That's correct. And listen, we don't advise
without
that.
penalty.
Let that thing really build up, okay? But nevertheless. Okay, how about this, GP?
Mm-hmm.
I saw this via Reddit on College Hoops Reddit yesterday. I actually think it's a pretty intriguing question. So Grant Nelson picks Alabama over Arkansas. Those were his 2 finalists. I'm wondering, who would you rather be since both these coaches took over? Nate Oats and Eric Musselman. I'll give you the stats here, and you just tell me. I think it's a good little thought experiment. Record-wise, Muss has won 66% of his games. He's 95-42 with a 41-30 league record. Nate Oats has won 69% of his games, 92-41, a little bit better, and is 7.5, 8 games better in the league. He's 49-23 in the league since they so Oats has him slightly on overall record and has him by a little bit of a comfortable margin in SEC play. Conference titles, Muss has none. Oats has 2 regular season titles and 2 SEC tournament titles. NCAA appearances, they each have 3. There was no tournament in 2020, but both were in their first years and really building stuff up. Muss has been seeded 3rd, 4th, and 8th, but Arkansas, as this podcast told you first, has made 2 Elite Eights and a Sweet 16 in that time. Alabama under Oats has a 1, 2, and 6 seed, 2 Sweet 16 runs, and a one and done showing. And then a little extra, how are they doing at getting guys into the NBA? Muss has 6 of them. Isaiah Joe, Moses Moody, Jalen Williams, and then this past year, 3 of them. Jordan Walsh, Nick Smith Jr., Anthony Black, Ricky Council, the 4th, just narrowly missed, but 6 from Arkansas. Oats has had Herb Jones, and he didn't recruit him, but he was the coach there, so he gets credit. He's had 5. Herb Jones, Josh Primo, J.D. Davidson, Noah Clowney, and then Brandon Miller. It's a pretty tight race, and you can kind of make your case for either one of them. Oats has been better overall winning games. Muss has had a little bit better NCAA tournament success. If you could be an Arkansas fan or an Alabama fan since the start of these guys' coaching tenures, which one would you pick?
Let me start by saying I think they're both great. I'd like to have either one of them, coaching my program. Off the court issues at Alabama over the past year notwithstanding, I think they're 2 of the very best coaches in college basketball. As you laid out the resumes since taking these jobs, it's very close. I think the simplest way to put it is Nate has had more regular season success. Muss has had more postseason success, but they've both been really, really effective, impactful, and they're both accomplished. I think the determining factor here, and I don't mean to bring up old stuff. I'm not trying. We've talked about this enough. But I do think that Nate's reputation took a beating over the past year because of the way he and his school handled the Brandon Miller situation. So there's some stuff there that just doesn't exist really with Muss or at all with Muss at Arkansas. And so I think I would lean toward Fayetteville a little more than Tuscaloosa, but I don't feel strongly about it. And if you wanted to, argue the other side, you might get me to a point where I'm not in agreement with you. I think they're both terrific. I think if you're a fan of either school, you should be happy. They both had incredible on-the-court success in different ways. I think the deciding factor here would probably be that one of them has had a real national controversy connected to his program, and the other one has not.
I'd agree. I would agree with that. Both coaches are for different reasons. I guess polarizing is not the right word. There are some. Muss is not Muss is not afraid to take his shirt off and self-promote from time to time. And I think there are some coaches in the industry that there are plenty that like him, but there are some that are kind of like, maybe.
It rubs some people the wrong way. It doesn't. How about this? But it doesn't.
It's also out there as well. But it's a very, very different thing. Than Oats.
Right. Yeah, these are 2 different things.
Be very, very clear. It's extremely, extremely different. And
like all that stuff, I don't find Muss anything other than entertaining. Like, I think he's a great basketball coach who's also like entertaining. And how about this? If I were a fan of a school, I would like somebody like Eric Musselman coaching my team, running my program, because he's He's full of energy. He's obviously very good. And whatever the promotion is, self-promotion or otherwise, I don't even care. I just find it all entertaining. And if I were a fan, I'd be eating it up.
Yeah, it's a very, very close race for me in terms of on the court stuff strictly here. I would narrowly take Arkansas only because there is something really that pulls you in as a fan when you get to that regional final and you are one game from the Final Four and it's just your team playing in a national window. He's done that twice, and then this past season made the surprise run to the Sweet 16, including, upsetting a one seed and doing so, beating Kansas there. But it's really, really close. And coincidentally enough, Grant Nelson wound up deciding between the two schools and decided to go with Oats in Alabama over Arkansas. Again, Bama's put in 5 players into the pros under Oats, and Arkansas has gotten 6 under Muss. But just an intriguing one overall. And, both SEC programs, similar color schemes, guys that were hired at the same time. It's pretty intriguing. And
starts with an A. Both schools start with an A.
There you go. And since those guys got there, they've each been operating like, top 4 level programs in the SEC at worst. It is interesting to see, and they'll be expected to be relevant once again.
Before we move on, real quick, I told I'm a believer in Kentucky now. Not necessarily that they're going back to the Final Four for the first time since 2015, but my only concern with Kentucky was, man, you just can't. I don't think you can win in this era with, nothing but freshmen. And there was a point in time 2 weeks ago where I know that I never believed John Calipari was going to wake up on the opening day of the season and be like, oh my God, I don't have any experienced players. Like, I always assumed he would add something, but I do think the additions of the past couple of weeks are significant. Getting Antonio Reeves back when, there were reports that he was leaning towards leaving Kentucky, graduating from Illinois State and becoming a grad transfer and going somewhere other than Kentucky, to get him back after that was reported, that's big time. And then adding Tre Mitchell, big time. I got him in the top 20 now. I think 17th in the top 25 and 1. Where are you at on Kentucky? You believer?
Still not there yet, and I'm probably never going to get there in the preseason because of the amount of youth on the team. They have upgraded the situation. Calipari has rallied a bit here, which is nice to see. Going to have to prove it on the floor, but better than it was. I did think about this in recent days in terms of, all right, is UK really building itself toward top 25 status? If you want to remain skeptical on that, I think that's entirely fair because, again, Cal's just going to trot out so many young dudes, and we'll see. And oh, by the way, you've also got, some injury uncertainty there as well. I wouldn't say top 20 yet, but the additions are important, and we will see who else is still coming down the pike here. Fascinating big-time year ahead for Kentucky and Calipari. Is going to have to perform at a high level to keep the heat away from him, and I still think it's possible that if it doesn't click the way that it should, possible. I'm not saying, again, don't aggregate the saying that this is what my prediction is. I'm saying if Kentucky has another year in which it is a letdown season, certainly if you don't make the tournament, then there's going to have to be some significant changes there, but it doesn't appear to be trending that way. And if anything else, UK is interesting in most seasons, and this roster has managed to, it's taken a long way to get there. And again, they're not done. I don't even know if Kentucky will fill up every scholarship GP, but way better now than it was a month ago. I mean, he is definitely, Cal and that staff have managed to change the temperature of the room in a way that I had some faith that would happen, but no guarantee when we started the month of June.
All right. One last thing. Rank these teams.
Okay.
Kentucky, as currently constructed. Alabama, as currently constructed. Memphis, without Mikey Williams, but with DeAndre Williams. And for right now, without Javon Quinter.
Kentucky, Bama, Memphis.
So Memphis, if they don't get Quinterly, like the starting point guard might be Jalen Young from Central Florida, which is he should be a backup point guard, but he might have to be the starting point guard. I'll let Penny and Rick Stansberry figure that out. But you could have something like Jalen Young, Caleb Mills, David Jones, DeAndre Williams, Jordan Brown, something like that.
I would go Memphis at the top of that list with Quinterly involved.
Oh yeah, I think I agree with you. If they had Quinterly, Mills, Jones, Williams, Brown, I might put that one even ahead of Kentucky. It's certainly on paper. That's a talented roster with a bunch of experienced guys.
I think I'd go Memphis. See, Bama brings back Sears. They got Estrada in. Nelson is involved. Ryland Griffin. I could flip-flop on this by the time I actually put out my preseason rankings in October. I would narrowly go Kentucky over Alabama, but that could mean that both of those teams are just hovering on the outside of my top 25 overall. Well, we'll see on that. But that actually feels very, very close. I like Memphis in that scenario best. So to answer your cue, Memphis, UK, Bama. I got to put them in an order. That's the order I'd go with right now.
Yeah, I would go Kentucky, then Memphis, then Alabama. But if Memphis were to get DeAndre Williams eligible and add Javon Quinterly,
yes,
then I might lean toward putting Memphis ahead of Kentucky. Without Quinterly, behind Kentucky. With Quinterly, maybe ahead of Kentucky. But without Quinterly, without Mikey Williams, but with DeAndre Williams, Caleb Mills, David Jones, Jordan Brown, I think I'd put that one ahead of Alabama. Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah.
By the way, before we move on to the NCAA stuff, we'll wrap. I've got a couple of comments here. Quinn says BYU might have had some older lineups. That's actually a good point. I thought
about that because I was thinking about this last night, and I said BYU might have.
You get a rogue dude or two that went on a mission. They're playing at 25. It's possible, but average age of a starting five at 24. That's pretty up there. I don't know. And then apparently there's a plumbing company that's in our chat session says the 1940s teams had 26-year-olds who had come back from World War II. That might be true actually. So. Maybe it's not the first time ever, but certainly in the modern era overall. By the way, there's a poll question up right now, which is which team would you rather have, the Bama or Arkansas, since those two took over? Nada, at the end of the pod, I'll ask you for the results. Don't let me forget. GP, can I take the reins here and talk a couple updates that happened out of Indy this week?
Yeah, of course. Division I Council met yesterday. What do we need to know from that?
Okay, I actually think this is potentially gonna wind up as a pretty important week in the history of college hoops, and the reason why is more than anything. Actually, I think I neglected to send this in the chat last night, but the council on Wednesday adopted the potential for men's college basketball to better govern itself and not have to walk in step with the rest of Division I. According to the release, it says, quote, oversight committees in basketball and football can propose and adopt rules changes for items under their purview. And if adopted by sports management committees, proposals would ultimately take effect only after they are reviewed by the council during a scheduled quarterly meeting. This is called a pilot program, so it applies to men's basketball, women's basketball, and football. Basically, the three most popular Division I sports are now on the table to regulate their sports more to their specific needs. It sounds obvious. People have been asking for it forever. It's finally now on the table. It's not yet there all the way, but this is a significant thing when it comes to matters of the college basketball calendar and how college basketball on the men's and women's sides wants to operate. So the formal step that needed to be taken to allow this to be a thing was taken this week, and I think it could have significant impacts on the sport and its calendar moving forward. As an example, there was a change that happened in the recruiting calendar, and there will be more, and I'll have more on this in the coming weeks, so we won't get too much in this now, but the council did approve a change to the recruiting calendar next year that will have a dead period that's basically 14 days long, because college coaches are already, and people involved in college basketball in general, like the low-level staffers that are barely getting paid to the richest D1 coaches, the new way that college basketball is operating from a portal situation and transfers and all that and recruiting, et cetera, it's just stretching people thin. And extending the dead period actually gives them a point on the calendar where they can actually, maybe put the phone down, go spend time with their families, or, if you're a young coach trying to break into the business, you can maybe, spend time with your significant other, do whatever you got to do. And the change to allow men's and women's college basketball to still legislate their sports and not say, okay, because we're going to do this doesn't mean that lacrosse has to do this, or soccer, or whatever, or vice versa. I think it's actually very significant, because it will not be a quote unquote one size fits all model, which is appropriate. Also related to this, GP, is, and there was a lot of talk about this. I'm actually pleasantly surprised this wound up passing, and it's going to be voted on for official change in October. The D1 Council had a proposal to reduce notification of transfer window days from 60, which is just too long, down to 30. Here's from the NCAA. Data from the past year indicate that most student athletes enter the transfer portal at the beginning of the transfer window. Gee, you don't say. Now that the proposal has been formally introduced, respective oversight committees and the Division I Student Athletic Advisory Committee will gather additional feedback, offer potential amendments to the proposal over the summer. A final vote on the proposal will be considered by the council during its October meeting. So, as it stood this past season, the portal opened, and I hated this, but the portal opened on the Monday after Selection Sunday, which just is bad business to me. No, there's never going to be a perfect situation. Some have suggested when your season ends, your 30-day window begins. If you play your last game on March 17, then on March 18, your guys can go in the portal, and there it is. Now, that's going to be a moving target for everyone, because if you play in the national title game, you can't go into the portal until the Tuesday after the title game. I certainly think that's better than what we have now. But if you want to say, all right, the portal is just going to open April 1 instead of the day after Selection Sunday, that's fine. Opponents of that idea will say, well, some guys are going to know they're transferring for like 3 weeks. They're just going to sit around. That's also not great. This guy's leaving. He's just kind of milling about your facility. There's no perfect solution to this, but you don't need 60 days. Scrunching it down certainly is a major upgrade there. There's also stuff about sports gambling I'm going to get to in a second here, GP. But any thoughts on any of that? Because I think this is refreshing that this is happening on this kind of timeline. I think in years past, GP, this might have taken a year or 2 or 3 to actually get momentum, if at all. But here we have tangible upgrades to the D1 men's basketball model that actually could make the sport better from a year-round perspective.
Okay, I guess I'd say I don't think it matters much, like when the transfer portal opens, because coaches, it is literally their jobs to know who's available, who's not available. How often do you think coaches know somebody's going into the transfer portal before they actually even get into the transfer portal?
Rare, but I do think
I think it's common.
Oh, okay. I'm talking more like it's rare that a coach will have a guy transfer and have it kind of be a blindside situation.
That's what that's my point. Is like I think coaches commonly know who they're losing before it's in the portal, and commonly know who's going to be available in the portal before they're in the portal. So when it opens, I don't think it matters that much, but I will say I didn't love that it opened. When did it open last season?
Literally,
after Selection. I don't like that.
That's not. We should not be having the portal fill up with 900 names,
because I do think suddenly you're in the most, and we talked about this when it happened. You're in the most important part of your season if you are in the NCAA tournament, and your entire focus as a staff should be on the game you're about to play and the hypothetical game you might play next. All of your resources should be focused on that. And the truth is, if you're doing your job right, you might need to have somebody, or even you as a head coach, but also be focused on the transfer portal, because there might be somebody available. You're Dan Hurley. You're losing, or you believe you're losing Jordan Hawkins, Adama Sanogo, Andre Jet, whatever. You're going to have to replace these guys, and probably out of the portal. Well, now the portal is open for 3 weeks, and you're coaching basketball, trying to win a national championship. There are guys who had inferior seasons at other schools. Their seasons are actually over. All of their focus can be on the transfer portal, but yours can't, because you're still trying to accomplish something. I don't like that. To some degree, you are at a disadvantage by playing deeper into the bracket than somebody who didn't even make the NCAA tournament as it pertains to the transfer portal. So if it were up to me, I would open it late. I would even wait. Let's go the Friday after the national championship game, something like that. But
fine by me. I think that's actually better from a media perspective and coverage, because if you've got a glut of transfers, you've actually got a good boost for coverage.
Right. And maybe if the goal is to increase coverage and off-season stories, let's make it the Monday after the national championship game, so that we don't lose a bunch of possible stories to a weekend.
Yeah.
Right. So like, let's do it on the Monday after the title game. But I guess I'd bottom line it by saying I don't care that much. I don't think it matters that much, but there is a better way to do it. Just because something doesn't matter that much doesn't mean there's not a better way to do it. And I think that would be a better way to do it.
Yeah. And chopping it from 60 to 30, I think is I banged that drum since the start of the 60-day window. I honestly didn't think they'd change it, but that's a really, really good thing. Also, we talked last summer. John Calipari's been, speaking of banging drums, he's been banging this one for a while now. He wants to have teams to have the ability to play exhibitions in the summer that are, televised. You receive a gate and play a couple of exhibition games. That's on hold. Now, I think if we flash back to last August, September, there was real optimism that this could get done in time to be voted in here so that it could be allowed this year. That's not going to happen. There is a split on this between coaches, administrators, and student athletes. So because of that, they're still going to discuss it, but it will not happen this year. To a reminder on this, basically, teams can play up to 2 exhibition contests or scrimmages or 1 tournament-style event that would be only 2 games. And that could happen, and maybe these things get tweaked, but the proposal was that you could do that in a year in which you don't go on an overseas trip. Okay.
So what's the argument against it?
Well, here's what the report had. All 32 D1 conferences were surveyed. 69% of men's college basketball players are in support of it. That's a pretty healthy number. 63% of women's D1 players are in support of it. Coaches, how about this? Gosh, split 47 for, 47 against. I guess the remaining 6% just had no opinion. 59% of women's coaches were against it. 60% of campus administrators were not supportive, and 60% of faculty representatives were not supportive. Part of the rationale for the continued review was the other significant issues priorities currently under review by D1 membership. One of the additional concepts, and I'll answer your question, GP, but one of the additional concepts for summer competition that the women's working group would discuss was possible 3-on-3 competition, typically played with 4 players on a team and no on-court coaching. The rationale being that could help with skill development and also, by the way, create a pipeline. 3-on-3 is now an Olympic sport. Fran Fraschilla coaches the 3-on-3 team on the men's side for Team USA. The arguments against it, I think, are based in some logistics when it comes to putting these events together, asking people to do that at a time of year. Like, if you're going to do this and you're going to get a facility and it involves more than just the coaches and the players getting together. There's actually logistics that you have to take care of on that end. And I think that is one concern with this. Another might be this. I'm just trying to pull from when I've heard from a few coaches on this and over the last month. I really haven't talked to any coaches about this in this calendar year. Some injury concerns. I remember one coach told me this, and listen, call it irrational if you want. I wouldn't disagree with you. Players that are searching for any kind of to this whole transfer notion and all this stuff. There are coaches that will deliberately and intentionally work their practices and their exhibitions and their scrimmages in such a way where they don't, like, coaches, a lot of them know, all right, I know my starting 5, I know my 6th guy, my 7th guy, my 8th guy. And then after that, like, I kind of have a good idea, and they will try and hide that hand as long as they possibly can as to not tick off anyone on their roster to avoid the situations where a guy gets to November 6th and he wants to transfer already. And I remember one coach specifically telling me, listen, we can do this kind of stuff. That could be awesome for the sport. I'm not necessarily opposed to it, but this could potentially accelerate my my roster uncertainty among some of my guys, and I'm not exactly looking to do that. It's a little bit illogical to me, but some coaches actually do think like that. I think this would be a wonderful thing for the sport. If we look up on August 17th and you've got, I'm just going to go completely hypothetical here, but if for whatever reason, Kentucky, Ohio State, and just throw a curveball in there, like even like a Richmond are involved in a 3-team, everyone plays each other once in a 2-game tournament, and it's over a 2-day period. Like, I just think it's and you get to see the freshmen coming in, the transfers, you see them in a competitive environment. I think it's a wonderful idea. No one's going to be obligated to do it, but this is a big point of contention for the NCAA, for Dan Gavitt, to increase summer basketball, because even as the release says, committee members plan to use a forward-looking perspective about how to best position college basketball for continued success in the ever-changing basketball ecosystem, since an emphasis on summer competition currently exists at every level of the game. Last thing for me here, GP. To that point, we've got summer recruiting starting next week. I'll be at Peach Jam, and that gets its own news cycle, as it should. But there's nothing at the college level. We're about to get ready for NBA Summer League, which has grown and grown and grown, particularly in the past 6-7 years. College basketball doesn't have something that's even a semi-equivalent to that. And I think for the stakeholders of the game, having something outside of the summer recruiting cycle is important to remind people of, all right, who's coaching where, what players will matter. Because of the transfer portal, you have this roster turnover. This is a way to just remind the people that care to be reminded about this in August that they're doing this. I'd like to see it happen. It does feel like truly 50-50 at this point, and now we know it won't happen until at least 24, but really it feels like 2025 might be the soonest something like this gets implemented, if at all.
Okay. I asked you what's the rationale against it, what's the argument against it, and nothing you said is an actual reason to not allow schools to do this. It is a reason, and I don't mean that like you. I know. I hear you. Yeah, it is what you said are reasons that some coaches might not want to do it, which is fine. I don't care. But how about this? Allow schools to do it, and if you want to do it, you can, and if you don't want to do it, you don't have to. Like we don't outlaw the zone in college basketball because some coaches don't want to play zone. We just say, hey, if you want to play it, you can play it, but you don't have to. Up to you. Doesn't matter to us. That would be my opinion on this. Like, if John Calipari wants to host summer exhibitions and go through all the logistical stuff that you got to do it,
right,
and show his hand and blah, 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 let him do it. And if Nate Oats doesn't want to do it for whatever reasons, or Eric Musselman doesn't want to do it, or Rick Barnes doesn't want to do it for whatever reasons, then they don't have to do it. Who cares?
I agree. And to this point, I wonder if the legislation that got approved to allow men's D1 and women's D1 basketball to further legislate their own sports separately from the way that things have to have traditionally needed to get passed at the D1 level and then the Board of Governors, if this ultimately allows D1, even if 40% of the membership at the D1 men's basketball level specifically says no, if enough people say yes, eventually this passes. But this did hit a little bit of a stall here, and you've got input, and it's fair to have it, but you've got input from faculty, and you should have player input, and that's there, the student athletes and administrators. So there's a lot of people have a lot of opinions on whether this should happen or not. To me, it seems obvious we should allow it to happen, even if it's logistically different. I get that. It can be done. It would be good for the sport. I think it should happen. But I don't know. We'll see. I know you got to get out of here. I did want to at least mention sports gambling has obviously taken over the sports universe. The NCAA did vote on this as well. I mean, we've had the NFL given season-long suspensions to this. The NCAA, in a refreshing move, opted to reduce the penalties for college athletes who wind up betting on sports that are basically pro sports. You still, if you cannot wager on your own sport, you're at risk continually, as you should be, of loss of eligibility and season-long bans, et cetera, et cetera. However, if for all other wagering violations, like on professional sports, cumulative dollar value of the wagers will be taken into consideration. And so basically it breaks down to, if you bet 200 or less on the DraftKings app or whatever on an NBA game or an NFL game, there's no significant penalty. $201 to $500, it's 10% of a season, so 3 games essentially. $501 to $800, it's 20% of a season. And then greater than $800 is loss of a 30% of a season's worth of eligibility. You have to go through rules and prevention education, and you could potentially face stricter sanctions. But kind of an extra thing that was thrown in there, GP, on Wednesday that I know a lot of people at the college athletics level are concerned about, but sports wagering is everywhere, and the idea that you are going to be able to stop Division I athletes at all levels from doing it just isn't based in reality. So this at least seems more appropriate, while at the same time, you are not allowed to gamble on the and nor should you be allowed. Let's be clear. You should not be allowed to gamble on the sports that you are participating in. So a little bit more well-rounded legislation came to the forefront with that yesterday.
in the spirit of scentless vape pens,
Oh, yes.
get your roommate, set up an account,
Oh, my God. Okay, here we go.
put his credit card on it. Your name, your social security number is not attached to it, whatever. Get the login. Gamble all you want. Right? Just don't be dumb enough to gamble under your own name. Do you realize if I went on, because I am technically an employee of a NBA franchise, if I were to gamble on an NBA game at DraftKings or FanDuel, it would flag me immediately because my social security number is in a database somewhere as an NBA employee. It was not even something like when you hear about these guys getting caught, it's not because somebody rats on them. It's because their social security numbers are in a database and they flag it the second you make a bet or it's something close to that. So like, just don't be dumb. Work around it. How about this? Don't gamble. As somebody who gambles, don't. You'll never win.
There you go.
All right.
There
let
you
me
go.
start there. Don't gamble because you can't win.
Except for the Eye on College basketball bracket games. That's the only thing.
Gamble on that for sure. No, you can't win. You'll never win. I know a guy who runs a sports book. I asked him one time. I said, of all your regular players, at the end of the year, how many of them are up? He's like, up? What do you mean up? I'm like they won money instead of lost money over a year. You know what he said? Zero. Nobody. Literally nobody. He said, like, guys have good weeks and good months and even good quarters, but over a year, I don't have a single player who is profitable over a year. So don't gamble. You will not win. You are just, you're, unless you can rationalize it like this. I'm spending money to have fun tonight. I could have spent this money going to the movies or going to dinner.
Yeah.
Or going to a play. Instead, I spent it on a baseball game. All right. If you can rationalize it like that, have fun, knock yourself out. But you're not going to win gambling. But if you are going to gamble and you are a Division I athlete, just don't be stupid about it. Gamble under somebody else's name and social security number, somebody you can trust, maybe your mom or your dad.
We've seen the headlines on the NFL side. We'll see if some of those wind up coming to the college sports angle. We got to get out of here. Before we do, nada, Alabama or Arkansas? What's the poll say? What team or what fan of a team would our viewers on YouTube here prefer at this stage?
They're preferring Arkansas at a 58% clip. I was kind of surprised by this because I thought the regular season thing would mean a little bit more, but they're going shirtless Muss at 58%.
We just gave Muss another reason to take off his shirt. When word of this gets back to Muss,
his shirt is off right now.
That's actually probably true. Now, what am I saying?
What if Muss is watching live and he just took his shirt off when he heard that 58% of voters prefer what he's doing at Arkansas?
I think MBPA Top 100 camp is still happening today, and he very well is probably down there. So if he is watching live as he's taking in some action with his shirt off, well, that's a legendary move from us, and we appreciate it all the same.
Shouts to Devin Downey. Shouts to Chester, South Carolina. Shouts to Huck, Larnell. Thank you guys once again for watching, listening to Eye on College Basketball Podcast. If you're not subscribed, please go subscribe anywhere you subscribe to podcasts, Apple, Spotify. Rate it, review it. There's more of us than there are of them. Needs to be reflected in the comments. So go do that. I thank you in advance, and we'll talk to you again real soon. Till then, take care.